Stealing the American dream from young working families has created political instabilities in America and shortchanged our national reproductive rates, which shortchanges our future also because we need people in order to support the system we have. We have created a lot of political instability in this country, and there's really two primary drivers that can be addressed with this. Primarily, the first biggest driver to the increase in house prices. We're talking about increases from 1970, before we went off the gold standard, something on the order of $23,000 for an average American home, to prices north of $410,000 today in 2025. We're talking about the average age of American homebuyers first purchase going from 30 to 40. By 40, most of the kids growing up are already well into their teens or grown up in many families. Families need to be able to buy homes while the kids are still small, or they can raise them in stable, productive environments. And a lot of people just don't want to have children when they got to shuffle them around in apartment complexes. And that's also another shortchange in our country. It also discourages marriage and the formation of families from the very beginning. So this cuts our country at its quick, and it really does a lot of damage to where we're heading. The young people today are extremely unhappy because the American dream is beyond their reach. So we're going to talk about some of these root causes, and we're going to talk about some things that can be done in the long term and the short term. There's a lot to be adjusted here, but we're going to talk about two primary areas of this, being taking the dollar off the gold standard and how that's affected home prices and what you can buy today. And we're going to talk about the regulatory burden for homes, which is now probably over $100,000 per home. We're talking about over 27% of the home price is just regulatory burden. Of course, it's interest rates too, but that's going to fluctuate. But there's a lot that can be done to turn this around, but it's going to take some dedication and fighting City Hall, plus trying to change the government overall policies of going off the gold standard. So let's talk about the gold standard part of this scenario first. In 1970, the price of gold was just $35 per troy ounce. Imagine if the dollar was tied to gold today, what the dollar would be worth. So the average good delivery bar of gold, the standard bar, is about 400 troy ounces. In 1970, that was worth $14,000. If you consider the U.S. Census at the time said in 1970, the reason I picked 1970 was we went off the gold standard the next year, 1971. Well, the average median home cost in 1970 was only $23,000 and $600. $23,600. So, how many gold bars would it have taken to buy a house in 1970? Well, about 1.69, less than 1.7, to be honest. So, that's pretty good. So, what could you buy with that today? Well, it's pretty astounding because if you look at the prices of today, the that would be worth something like $1.55 million. So if you go into it and look at it today, a bar of gold at 400 ounces is in $4,090 an ounce is worth $1.636 million dollars, over $1.5 million, $1.636 million for a bar of gold. So if you take that and you look at the house cost today of $410,000, just a quarter of a bar of gold would buy today's average house. If you divide $410,800 by, which is the average price today, by 1,660 $636,000, you come out at approximately 0.25%. So just a quarter bar of gold. So imagine what you could buy today with 1.6 bars of gold. Like I said, you can buy a mansion. So, of course, we build bigger houses today too than we built back then. We put more junk in them. That also probably drives up the house price. But the regulatory burden is a huge piece of the equation. Now, just the base regulatory burden of where you're figuring out such things as a restrictive zoning, land use, and barriers for land use and other financial policies. Uh, they've been estimated to run the prices up to about another 98,000, somewhere in that category of dollars, about well, close to 100,000, about 23.8% actually over that. If you just look at the regulatory burden that comes from some of your housing organizations that have been figuring this stuff up. So let's have a look at some of that. Um, what we have is Jim Tobin. He's the president and CEO of the National Association of Home Builders, and he talks about these regulations playing a massive cost. But in what he's saying, he's estimating 24% based on those three areas I just named, which would put actually about $94,000 of regulatory cost in the house. But there's something he didn't account for that I've chapped at a little bit on this channel in the past. There's another area of regulatory burden that he's not accounting for, and that is that your states, your cities, your counties, especially the cities, have put such a regulatory burden on the mom and pop shops that do things such as HVAC work and electrical, maybe plumbing, and things like that. They require an extensive amount of certifications now. I had a electrician I used to hire to come work in my house. I had him come in and redo the stuff that a more expensive, like four times more expensive, big house that does electrical stuff did. And they did a terrible job. I hired this other guy to come in and redo it. He says, Greg, I'm gonna have to get out of this business. He says, I got to do 21 certifications a year now. They cost me about $1,000 a piece. And he says, it's killing me. He says, I'd spent about a week, preparing and studying and, doing all these other things. Plus, he had a day job. So he says, I can't afford to do this business anymore. I'm quitting. And I also had an HVAC guy who used to come out and fix my HVAC. He says, "Oh, all you need is this little solenoid valve for $50." The big houses would tell me, "You got to replace your entire system." Back then, they were quoting me $5,000. It's probably closer to 10 now. So, $50 versus $5,000 with experience with the mom and pop shop guys who really knew what they were doing versus a bunch of snot-nosed kids and techs that really don't give a rat's egg. They work for the big houses, the big companies that just put this in their overhead in terms of this regulatory cost, and they charge you out the kazoo to have these techs come out and work on your stuff and charge you way too much and really mess things up a lot of times. They claim it's all for safety. When you got to have their work redone by somebody that knows what they're doing, then I really challenge this supposition that it's buying you safety. What it is buying you is another area of increased cost of house building. And you can figure this increased cost. I ran it through my AI. It said it probably adds $10,000 to $20,000 to the price of a house. And this is where I come up with my overall percentage of regulatory burden for house buying at about 27%. So when you look at it that way, that's very hefty. We're talking, something older, maybe $110,000 added to your home price just due to regulatory burdens. All these communities, they think they're doing something for you. Uh, for example, Mr. The guy I was just quoting here, Jim Tobin, he went on. He said that sometimes there are communities that just regulate because they want to impede growth. They don't want more homes built. And then their time is money in real estate. He says you own the land, you're paying taxes, and while you wait for local approvers, costs keep rising. Oh yeah, there's all these permitting costs now too. And then many communities require developers to install sewer, water, roads, and electrical infrastructure, and all that gets folded in the price of a home. So just a whole lot more that goes into it because they're wanting to have all their local companies get a bigger piece of the pie, even going off grid out here where I'm at in Navajo County, Arizona. The regulatory burden and the things that they put on in terms of these different checklists you have to go through, permits, is actually bigger than, and this is a poor county. This is a poor county. The regulatory burden here is bigger than Madison County, Alabama, which has a far bigger gross income than this area. And then, so it don't really make any sense. It's just lining the pockets of the businessmen who go in and lobby the local county boards, the local city boards, and push for these increased regulations. And this cost is passed to you, and it's passed to the average American consumer, and it makes home prices unaffordable, basically. It puts things out of reach. And this is things that we can combat through talking to our we got to fight City Hall. Like I said, if you want to deal with this, fight City Hall. And it's a battle worth doing because there are young people being deprived of their dreams. And that's a crime. Just to line some fat cat pockets. That's what it really boils down to. We're depriving people of their dreams. We're depriving young people the ability to build homes, to raise families. The very bedrock of American society is being taken away from us by greed and corruption and nepotism built into the system from City Hall on up to the federal government. So what should we do? Like I said, go into these city halls and tell them to roll back these regulations, roll back these permitting requirements, roll back these certification requirements. They're really gone too far, and it's beyond safety, and it hasn't got anything to do with safety, to be quite honest about it. When you, like I said, when I got to hire somebody that knows what they're doing, go in and redo the work of a bigger house, then that's wrong. That's just wrong. Yeah, you do need people that know what they're doing. You do need good certified, well, you need people that understand how to do the wiring safely. And you need like a real electrician to do some of the work. But the certification requirements on them are too high. It's just too much. It's beyond the what ought to be. And this is something that people ought to stand up and fight. Maybe we need to organize for this because it's really private. It's caused our country's future, and it's causing political instability. This is why a lot of young people are pushing for socialism and communism, thinking that's some kind of an answer, but it's not. Because big government is what you get with that, and big government just puts in more regulations. Yeah, that's what happens. So it will backfire, but that's, the young people don't know where to turn. They're twisting in the wind because their dreams have been taken from them. And we need to take it upon ourselves to help them back into their dreams. Now, mostly home buying is done by baby boomers, and so the actual average age, even the first purchase age, is 40. The actual average age of a home purchase is 59 years old. And so when you think 40 now, there's some talk about, well, we'll come up with a 50-year mortgage. So you're going to have a mortgage that you can't pay off until you're at least 90? Or if you're buying a home and you're 60, 65, which a lot of people are doing, if the average age is now 59, it may be 70. A 50-year mortgage don't make any sense at all. None. So it may help some people get into a home. We got to get interest rates down. So we do need to control inflation, but the Federal Reserve is kind of held these rates up artificially because they're not in really favor of the current political establishment in this country, which is a crying shame. It shouldn't have nothing to do with that. And we've got to get the regulatory burden down. The other thing we ought to do is put this country back on the gold standard. And because our dollar is dropping like a rock, and the rest of the countries of the world are trying to drive it down to nothing because they're trying to economically defeat the United States. And this is being led by our good friends over in Beijing. I say good friends cynically here, if you might imagine. They are really trying to economically kick the United States to the can. And they're doing a pretty good job of it right now. We need to wake up to this. The current trend is to talk about things like stable coin dollar, stable coin, kind of like an alternate to Bitcoin, or the the CBDCs. A lot of people says, well, Trump's not going to go with CBDCs, but he's come up with a stable coin. The only difference between the central bank digital currencies and stable coin is that one, the central bank digital currency CBDC was to be issued by the Fed, but the stable coins are to be issued by the owners of the Fed, the individual banks that own the Fed. How is that really any better? Does this not lead to the same regime of digital tracking and control and domination that the other would lead to? I think so. And where is the stability in it? Oh, yeah, like Bitcoin. Bitcoin, what's it based on? Nothing. People's willingness to exchange for it. And stablecoin isn't going to be a whole lot better. We need something based on gold. We need to go back and besides it, how constitutional is it to have the central banks or their owners issuing currency? It's supposed to be our Congress, according to our Constitution. We need to return to our roots and build this country the way it ought to be and base the dollar on gold. That was the intention. Gold is real money, and you can see the value of it has skyrocketed as our dollar has plummeted. And all these things conspire together to rob young people of their dreams. It's creating political instability, which could lead our nation into a bit of chaos in the near future. We've got to stop the chaos. You know, I'm an old guy, but I like to see my kids prosper and have a good future. I like to see my grandkids prosper and have a good future, especially my grandkids. They're the ones who'll be up next dealing with this. I like to know that they've got a stable country to live in and can achieve the American dream. There's no reason why we can't. We've not developed the tiniest fraction of land in this country. One thing that might ought to be done is to dispose of a lot of the federal owned lands. The West almost our entire state of Nevada. Is this kind of crazy? Now there's some discussion of that, but I think that needs to be looked at. Maybe a way that the federal government can raise some money to help pay down its debt, which is also a big financial burden on this country. Sell off some of the assets. Sell off a whole lot of what the federal government owns. And take that and put it in the treasury to pay off this stinking crazy insane $38 trillion debt, or at least to help with that. So these are things, but what can you do in the short term? How can you deal with this? Well, what I did, I built a tiny home. I had a mortgage in Alabama, which I had I had some credit card debt due to a unfortunate relationship with a previous girlfriend who ran my credit cards the moon, and then she escaped on me, basically. I actually had her warrant out for arrest. She fled the state. Um, but, and then I probably could have paid that off, but instead I was investing in my own little homestead there and worm farm and trying to commercialize things. And at first it was working pretty good. I was having good sales. I was able to hire decent people, but the labor pool went to heck. And the whole financial model I was operating on, which seemed sound at first, the bottom just fell out just due to labor issues. And it really cost me. It cost me very significantly. And I found that I wasn't able really, I knew I wouldn't be able to pay off my mortgage and pay off my debts that I had on top of that as I'm running into my retirement years here. Almost my days with a regular career is almost over. So I knew I had to make some big changes. So I came here to Arizona, and because I bought land here cheaper much earlier with the idea of starting a western division of my worm farm, which I am restarting, but I'm going to operate it at a scale where I can control the labor. It's going to be me, not somebody I hire. Unless I find some really good, trustworthy people, I might scale up. But I got to really find the right people for that. But all that aside, the what I did is I started a home here. I built it. Basically, it's just a shed, and I basically built the first part of it myself. Me and some friends. I had friends come here and help me out. And we built this thing. We built the floors, framed the walls, and put the floor upstairs and put a roof on it. And I had the siding on that side. And then I left in 2023 to return to Alabama where I ran into some other financial issues with the transmission problem with the vehicle I was driving. That's another story. But the tiny home approach. Now, I have hired a carpenter to finish this out because I was too busy working too many irons in the fire. So I've hired a local carpenter to finish this thing out. But I've saved a lot of money, and I got out from under a mortgage. This place, there's no mortgage. We have some credit card debt, but there's no mortgage on this place. That's the good news. Uh, Tiny home is a way that a lot of people can get out of what they're doing. But a tiny home really isn't probably what you want. For an older person like me, it's fine. It's cheaper to operate. It's easy to heat. Open some windows for cooling. But for the young couples, they still need homes. So there might be some way to kind of work between the notion of tiny homes. You can put in two or three tiny homes to cover a family, and you can buy them cheap from Amazon and different places now. You can buy tiny homes ready to go. Find you some cheap land somewhere out in the desert like I did. But the other thing you can do is uh, is maybe build hybrid homes, homes that may in part have a tiny home or pre-manufactured home for the basic utilities, the HVAC, the kitchen area, where you got most of your plumbing, your bathrooms, and then stick build the bedrooms, the living room. Or you can use 3D printing maybe to build a part of your home. I got this concept for the universal habitat that you need to check out because that's a home that you can live in and make a living out of that could be built mostly with volunteer labor, or it could be built with 3D printing or stick built, however you want to go about it. There's a lot of options for that. And hey, best thing you could do really would be to go Amish, where the whole communities pitch in and just build a house. But not everybody is up for going Amish. But that's one model for family housing that still works today because they're community built. And that's how that used to be done way back in the old days. So maybe we need to rebuild communities and have just people working together more like they used to. It wasn't just Amish. That's how they did it everywhere back when my parents were kids and their parents. So that was just the way it was done. Of course, my parents grew up in the 20s and 30s, 1920s and 30s, almost 100 years ago. But, these are things that can be done. Like, hey, I had friends help me get this place started. There is still a model for that. And I really appreciate that. That really saved me. I was in a bind, and that really saved my skin. So I got a lot of appreciation for that. But there are options you can choose. I think a hybrid combination of a manufactured home, or manufactured homes actually aren't that bad either, and a maybe stick built. This is stick built, by the way. This is stick built. If you stick build the easier parts, it might be more affordable. Just thinking out of the box here. You got to think out of the box. So I'll try to find my universal habitat home and put the link up here. So check that out, my friends. If you haven't seen that video, you really ought to see it. A home you can make a living out of and live out of, grow all your food in, and have everything you need. I think that's a great approach. So check that out. Again, the link is up there. So thank y'all all for watching. And we do need to consider things to do to turn this around, my friends. We've got to change the cost of housing. So with that, I'm saying again, thank you for watching and